Hey everyone, we're going to be starting our live stream on the topic of decentralized exchanges, DEX. And we're going to be talking about that in just a few minutes, but first, I'm going to bore you with some advertising about how it's possible for me to do these live streams, make them available ad-free, and make them available for free and open for participation to the public. It takes a big team to do this, where does my funding come from? Well, it comes from the many people who support me on Patreon, on YouTube with YouTube memberships, and with direct crypto donations. And I wanted to thank all of those people, so you're going to listen to these brief messages, and in a couple of minutes we'll be back. Now, if you haven't already seen the code aantonop DEX on slido.com, so you can start asking questions while you watch these messages.
At a social event organised by Andreas as part of his Patreon support. We just had a few drinks in a pub, which is a Punch Tavern, downtown London, so it's been a really fun evening to meet a lot of like-minded people.
We should support the work Andreas is doing. He's doing so much in getting new people into Bitcoin and into Bitcoin education.
He's a great teacher. He can explain very complex topics in an easy to understand way. He's very honest, very precise, technically prepared, and intellectually honest. I think is his best characteristic.
Brings such clarity to really complex subjects, which is Bitcoin, and the industry around it.
He has been a very, very good inspiration for me, and every Bitcoin I'm giving to him, it will be very well used in helping others understand Bitcoin, and I think it will improve the world at some point.
Being a patron, I get to meet Andreas, and that's why I love being a patron. I'm going to continue being a patron.
I think it's just a good thing. If you're interested in learning new things and also want to support the Bitcoin community, then you got to be a patron.
Being a Patreon makes you feel special. You can attend to his live Q&A sessions. You can meet him at happy hours. It's really great, totally worth it. I'm very, very enthusiastic of being a Patreon.
I'd like him to be able to produce his great and valuable content in the future, free from advertising, and just with the help of his Patreons, and that's why I'm supporting him on Patreon.
And here we go. Welcome to this Saturday's bonus live stream Q&A. I'm Andreas Antonopoulos, and I'll be answering the questions that you've submitted to the Slido over the past week if you're a Patreon subscriber, over the past hour if you're a YouTube member, and now live if you're someone who just joined us. Today we're doing a special experiment. We're streaming simultaneously on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, and I'm hoping you don't get any lag, latency, or mishaps because of that, but please do let us know how it's going so we can adjust for future sessions. So far, I think it's going okay. Now, when you decide to ask a question, remember, if you try to ask a question that has already been asked, you end up splitting your votes. Even if that question isn't quite right, it's better to vote for a question that's close enough rather than add another question to the queue. I will only be able to answer about a dozen questions during today's session, which will take just over an hour, and then So if you really want to, please make sure you vote instead of asking a brand new question. Then again, if you ask a brilliant question and get lots of votes, yeah, you might make it. So it's always a battle. It's a strategic game. All right, let's talk about decentralized exchanges. I hope you're all ready. We'll go to our first question. Hernan asks, I could find different types of DEX. Is it just a marketing word for P2P trading? Or does it really imply standards, fundamentals, or specific technology? Hernan, it's a marketing word. It doesn't actually mean anything, because the word decentralized in itself isn't really a definition. It describes a spectrum. It describes a group of behaviors. How decentralized? Which part of it is decentralized? Are there parts that are not decentralized? Well, all of these questions will lead you to having certain criteria. And using those criteria, you can decide whether what you're looking at is really a DEX or is it a sex. Now, this is probably the only type of sex that is bad sex. Sex, Centralized Exchange, CEX. My producer is laughing behind the camera. It's very difficult to keep a straight face when I make such silly puns at this moment. But if you want to know the difference between a centralized exchange and a decentralized exchange, you have to ask some follow-up questions, just like we talked about in a previous live stream about DeFi. And we said, well, is it really DeFi? How do you know if it's DeFi? And what happens if it's just CeFi? Same thing applies here. And in fact, the concepts of DeFi and decentralized exchanges are very closely tied together. Although on today's live stream, we will talk about other types of decentralized exchanges, not just the ones that apply to the DeFi space, the Ethereum space, the ERC20 token space, etc. So, Hernan, stand by. There will be more on this topic. Let's see what else we have here. There are some additional questions that are very close to that first one, so I'm just going to quickly go through these. The term decentralized exchange implies 100% decentralization, but how decentralized are they really? Between DNS, ISPs, cookies, what pitfalls await? Asks Yes to Crypto. Hi there, Yes to Crypto. Thank you for your support and great questions. What does it imply? Yeah, it doesn't really imply 100% decentralization. I think that's a naive approach, and I'm certain the people marketing these exchanges really want to apply 100% decentralization. But of course, it isn't 100% decentralization. I don't think there is a single decentralized exchange that could even come close to claiming 100% decentralized operation, although maybe Bisq is one of them. Maybe one of the smart contract exchanges, if you access it through a browser that is pulling the HTML off something like IPFS, maybe. But then again, it's a very difficult concept to pin down. You've identified some very interesting issues here, which is that how do you access the decentralized exchange? And how you access it in itself may be a centralized portal. So, for example, if you're accessing a decentralized exchange over the web, then the website itself is a centralized point of failure. It's a centralized point of compromise. What if that website is compromised? Does that change the security model for your access to the decentralized exchange? What about its ability to trace your IP address? Or put cookies in order to breach your anonymity onto your browser? What about some other potential pitfalls with accessing services that you want to be anonymous over the internet? Anonymity and decentralized exchanges have a very close connection, and that's kind of what Yes to Crypto is hinting at here. So we'll dive into that again in a bit. While we're on the topic, another question from Yes to Crypto. Full-time traders rely on as many knowns as possible. One of these is fees. Centralized exchanges have published fees. Yes, usually the average fee ranges from between an arm and a leg. But how do decentralized exchange fees work? Are they the same? Well, it depends. It depends on the nature of the decentralized exchange. You have to consider a couple of different aspects of fees here. The first one is that decentralized exchanges, almost by necessity, involve on-chain transactions. If you're not doing on-chain transactions, then where exactly is the trade happening? And if it's happening on a database, then it's not a decentralized exchange. It's a custodial centralized exchange. So for a decentralized exchange, one of the key components is that the trade happens by some kind of on-chain transaction. That could be an on-chain transaction into a multi-sig escrow, for example, if you're doing a fiat to Bitcoin or vice versa trade. It could be an atomic swap between chains, if you're doing, for example, a Bitcoin to Ether exchange. It could be a smart contract transaction if you're doing an Ether to DAI, or one Ether ERC token to another Ether ERC token. But in order to gain the advantages of decentralization, you're looking at an on-chain transaction. And that's a good thing, because then you take advantage of the capabilities of a decentralized blockchain in order to gain a decentralized exchange capability. And you can do that across blockchains with this really interesting technology called atomic swaps. More on that later. So that's one fee. You're going to have to pay that. And in some cases, that's a pretty big chunk of money. Like right now, fees on Ethereum are really, really high. We're going through a period where Ethereum is seeing a lot of volume of transactions, and that's driven fees to really extreme levels. Surprisingly, even more than Bitcoin right now. The same thing applies to Bitcoin. The fees aren't as high, but there are still quite substantial fees, especially in times when trading is heavy, which is when you would want to be using one of these platforms. In fact, one of the disadvantages of decentralized exchanges is this latency. Because you have to do on-chain transactions, you have to wait longer. Centralized exchanges are much more efficient because they inject themselves as an intermediary, and everything happens off-chain in their own databases, with all of the risks that come with that. Now, the fees are not just transaction fees. There might be additional fees. Many decentralized exchanges, for example, include various forms of escrow. And those escrow capabilities that protect you, especially in the case where you're doing a fiat to crypto exchange, and escrow is absolutely required. You don't have the ability of finality in fiat. You don't have the ability of an atomic swap. Then you have an escrow fee. That depends on the decentralized exchange and will be advertised as part of the transaction. And then finally, there may be additional fees for market makers, market takers that are different from the fees of market makers. And again, usually you'd have to dig into how each exchange sets those fees. Paul asks, if a decentralized exchange uses Tor, with the recent discovery that almost 25% of Tor relays could be compromised and used to steal Bitcoin, would that be a potential issue? Oh boy. Now, if you haven't heard of this, this is the latest attack to specifically target Bitcoin holders. The way this attack works is as follows. Some organization, group, cabal, cartel, hacker, collective, or whatever, F society, is basically has taken over or had taken over up to 25% of all Tor exit nodes, and we're using that to intercept traffic to specific destinations that involved Bitcoin mixers. Specifically, they were targeting Bitcoin mixers as far as I know. And what they were doing is they were targeting users who were using Tor to anonymize their participation in Bitcoin mixers. And then they were applying a specific attack called SSL stripping. Now, what SSL stripping is when you are traveling across the internet, and there is an intermediary between you and the final site. This happens, of course, with Tor. The exit nodes are intermediaries. They're proxies to your connection. It happens with VPNs, and it can also happen with your internet service provider. And in all three cases, because you're going through a proxy, that proxy can intercept the traffic that's outgoing. Your initial connection to an SSL site itself, just the connection itself, is not encrypted. It's used to negotiate an encrypted connection, so that initial connection can be intercepted. On the other side, the proxy sends a fake connection to the site that you want to connect to, let's say the Bitcoin mixer, and then takes the response and strips out the SSL and sends it back to you as a clear HTTP connection. So you connect to this site over clear HTTP while the proxy connects over SSL, and that forces your connection to degrade and strips the encryption. And of course then your details are traveling in the clear, and information being sent back to you by, let's say, the mixer is also traveling in the clear and can be modified. And usually the modification is to substitute a destination address there, causing you to send money to the wrong place, causing you to lose your money. We don't know how successful this attack was, but it certainly was attempted for quite a while. Mostly gone now because the exit nodes have been disconnected, but very much possible at any point in time. So these are the kinds of attacks that make one aspect of decentralized exchanges a really touchy subject, and that is, how do you connect to the decentralized exchange itself? And we talked about how if you connect over the web, then the website itself, and of course the entire path between you and the website, is not decentralized or not decentralized enough. Now, you can protect against this particular attack with a number of countermeasures. First of all, any site that serves up SSL should be using a system called HSTS, which is Hypertext Strict Transport Security. This enforces SSL connections and prevents a man-in-the-middle attack or person-in-the-middle attack. The other thing you can do is you can install a little plugin in your browser, and I never use a browser without this little plugin. It's a plugin made by the EFF, and it's called HTTPS Everywhere. HTTPS Everywhere simply prevents your browser from even opening plain unencrypted HTTP to any site, which means that if a site doesn't have SSL, you can't connect to it, and that's probably a good thing. You can disable it on a site-per-site basis, but if you were trying to do a Bitcoin mixing operation or access a decentralized exchange and it wouldn't load because of HTTPS Everywhere, that's a good hint not to disable it for that site, because something very weird is happening. You can also configure a web server to enforce these things and never accept HTTP connections. That doesn't defeat SSL stripping, but in conjunction with HSTS, can actually enforce the use of SSL. Lots of little pitfalls here. All right, are we enjoying this so far? Is everyone having fun on the chat? I'm looking forward to more of your great questions. So far, it's been a fantastic start. Really, really great questions coming in. And here's another question from a recurring visitor and fan of ours. It's Anabal's mom. A decentralized exchange implies not having custody of people's money. Which are the specific technical mechanisms that allow decentralizing trust in an exchange? Asks Anabal's mom. And before I answer that question, I am noticing to my horror that Anabal has discovered that it is possible to embed emojis in the Slido questions, which I didn't know until this very minute. I am now very worried about what happens next on Slido now that you can embed emojis in your question. Oh, I'm going to have to try and decipher them in real time and read your questions with emojis. At least this question was easy to understand, right? People's money. It's not that hard, but why? Why are you doing this to me, Slido? Okay, back to the question. Anabal asks, a decentralized exchange implies not having custody of people's money. What are the specific technical mechanisms that allow decentralizing trust in an exchange? Well, here it goes, Anabal's mom. This is the simple slogan we use to understand this most fundamental principle of cryptocurrency. Not your keys, not your coin. Cheers to that. Ah, fresh coffee. Lovely. Now, not your keys, not your coins is the foundational principle. And what it means is that custody over keys determines ownership and control over funds. Now, if you do not have custody of your keys, you do not have ownership of your funds. Centralized exchanges are custodial exchanges. The key and most fundamental concept in a decentralized exchange, which I would require, I wouldn't really call it a decentralized exchange unless it had this property, is that it is non-custodial. That is the key differentiator. You control your keys. And how do decentralized exchange do this? They do it with three, okay, let me revise that, with three fundamental technologies. The first one is peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer networking, which is used with peer-to-peer applications, things like IPFS-hosted websites, or in the case of some decentralized exchanges, a full peer-to-peer client that is your only interface to the exchange. That would be the example of Bisq, B-I-S-Q, one of my favorite decentralized exchanges that involves a completely self-contained application that is your peer-to-peer gateway. There is no website to go to with Bisq. That means that you are operating a wallet within a peer-to-peer application that acts as your decentralized exchange. The second technology that is required here is some form of multi-sig escrow. In order to ensure that a transfer happens, you need to be able to have some mechanism for dispute resolution or fraud prevention. And the way that's done in quite a few different decentralized exchanges is with some form of multisig. That's very common in Bitcoin. In Ethereum and other smart contracts platforms, the non-custodial swap of funds is done by a smart contract, which again ensures that if you put money in and the other person puts money in, the transaction actually happens, and it happens atomically. Atomically means that you can't have a half exchange. You can't take my Bitcoin but not give me your Ether. And of course, that aspect, the atomic aspect, is enforced by a smart contract. If you're doing this kind of exchange across blockchains, that aspect is enforced by a smart contract that is implemented in both blockchains and is called an atomic swap. And an atomic swap is a really interesting little technology which ensures that you deposit funds on the chain such that revealing a secret will release those funds. And the other person deposits funds on their chain such that revealing a secret will release those funds. And in order for you to claim their funds, you have to reveal the secret to your funds. And for them to claim your funds, they have to reveal the secret to their funds. Meaning that as soon as one of the two transactions goes through, the other one can go through and cannot be reversed. This ensures that either both go through or neither goes through, and that's how an atomic swap works. It ensures that you don't need an intermediary. You may still need some way of matching buyers and sellers. That's the order book functionality, and that in itself may be decentralized, may be centralized. But as long as each person has custody of their own keys, that is the fundamental aspect of a decentralized exchange. A similar question. Decentralization is not trustlessness. Can you please talk about the differences and where leading DEXs fall on these spectrums? Tomer asks. Well, I'm not going to go into a step-by-step analysis of specific exchanges. There's a reason for that. I can't really endorse, verify, confirm, or review these exchanges because I haven't audited the smart contract code or the peer-to-peer code, or the atomic swap smart contract code, or any of the other functions of these exchanges. So the degree to which they're actually decentralized depends on a lot of factors and requires a lot of research and review. So they're not trustless necessarily. You are trusting in something. The question is, what are you trusting in? And so let's look at it from a hierarchical perspective. First, you're trusting in the underlying platform. Now, that's fairly straightforward. If what you're trusting in is the Bitcoin platform, great, but there's not much you can exchange if you're just trusting the Bitcoin platform. If you're exchanging Bitcoin and fiat, now you have two problems because you're trusting three platforms. You're trusting Bitcoin, you're trusting the banking system, wire transfer, Zelle, money transfer, IBAN transfer, PayPal, or whatever underlying mechanism you use, or cash. And you're trusting some escrow mechanism built into the peer-to-peer system that ensures that you won't get robbed if the cash then disappears from your bank account or fails to appear in the first place. If you're dealing with a DEX that's doing atomic swaps, you're trusting the platform on one side, whatever blockchain that is, the platform on the other side, whatever blockchain that is. And you're also trusting the smart contract that's implementing the atomic swap and hoping it doesn't have too many vulnerabilities. Now, atomic swaps are very, very simple contracts, and therefore it's fairly easy to review, audit, and if you've seen something that's been used a lot through many iterations and with a lot of maturity, you can trust that a bit more. If you're going for a full-blown decentralized exchange that has a decentralized order book, liquidity pool, market feeds through oracles, and is doing decentralized exchange for a variety of tokens through atomic swaps, or even through a mechanism of wrapped or asset-backed or collateralized tokens like wrapped Bitcoin, or using a fiat-denominated stablecoin token like DAI or USDT or something like that, now you have a whole can of worms, really, because now you're trusting every element of this compound smart contract application. So if there's a bug in DAI, if there's a bug in USDT, if there's a bug in USDC, if there's a bug in WBTC, if there's a bug in the ERC20 system, all of these things can cause problems. Then again, you know, it really depends how much risk you're willing to take, and that depends on how much money you're exchanging and how long you're exposed to a risk. As with many other things, my general attitude to using exchanges is get in, do it, get out. And maintain custody at the two ends. So take my funds, put them in, make the exchange, take them out. If I can maintain custody throughout the entire thing and expose myself for a very minimum amount of time, even better. Decentralization is not trustlessness, as Tomer explains. It is trust minimization, and it is a scale of trust minimization, which means you never know where you are on that scale. With many of these things, what's important is having enough maturity in the system that you feel you can trust it. There are some systems that have been operating as decentralized exchanges for a couple of years now. I would trust those a lot more than some system that was launched a couple of days ago. All right, we have 500 people watching right now. This is probably a good time to do one of the features that many people enjoy. When we first launched this, it was a suggestion by one of the patrons, and they asked if you wanted to ask a question of yourself, Andreas, what question would you ask? Can you take us down the rabbit hole? And we did it as a little fun topic at first, and now you've been asking for it on the chat, and if I don't do one, you miss it. So let's head straight down the rabbit hole. In this rabbit hole, we're going to talk about one of the most popular decentralized exchanges that no one calls a decentralized exchange, no one thinks of as a decentralized exchange, but is in fact the world's largest, most liquid, most efficient, most widespread, and most anonymous decentralized exchange of all: the labor market. Because if you exchange your labor, your products, your services, your crafts, your designs, your art, your web design capability, or whatever else that you do for crypto, you've just engaged in a decentralized exchange of value. This decentralized exchange, which I will call Earn It, is in fact a global market. It exists everywhere. It exists everywhere that two people want to exchange something of value, and one of them has crypto. It is completely anonymous. It is peer-to-peer. It is decentralized. It is borderless. It's neutral. And it's the most censorship-resistant mechanism for acquiring cryptocurrency. So next time someone starts talking about a decentralized exchange, don't forget the biggest decentralized exchange that for millennia has been operated on the most available peer-to-peer decentralized currency, cash, can now be accessed for decentralized exchange of value for crypto. And that was Down the Rabbit Hole. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly do. Let's see what else is happening here. Don't go into screensaver. All right, the next question comes from Tripluca. What aspects shall we look at to assess the degree of decentralization of a decentralized exchange? All right, well, let's look at these following aspects. 1, is it custodial or non-custodial? That's a very important criterion. I think that's the foundational criterion. 2, does it require some kind of identification? Does it follow Know Your Customer, KYC, or AML laws? If it is, it's probably backed by a company. That company is in a jurisdiction. That jurisdiction imposes regulation, and the company has no choice but to extend those regulations to its customers. By comparison, a true decentralized exchange doesn't have a company behind it, and therefore often doesn't really have any of these regulations. So does it have KYC AML? Do you need to prove identity in order to use these decentralized exchanges? That's the second criterion. Third, does it operate across multiple cryptocurrencies and blockchains, or is it limited to one? Dependence on only one blockchain, to me, is a reduction in decentralization. So, for example, if it's an Ethereum ERC20 only exchange, that's somewhat centralized. It's centralized in the respect that it is centralized on Ethereum and doesn't support other chains. So if I see something that does Bitcoin blockchain, Monero, Ethereum, Zcash, and a whole bunch of other things, then I'm going to think of that as being slightly more decentralized than the previous one. 4, does it have a decentralized order book, or does it rely on a central service for matching buyers and sellers? 5, what is the interface that you're using to access it? Is it a website? And if it is a website, that is a centralized single point of failure. Is it a website that is served off an ENS, Ethereum name service, or IPFS link, or some other distributed storage, decentralized web that allows you to access it without a central point of service? If it does, or is it served through a peer-to-peer application that you install on your desktop? Again, those are good indications that it's decentralized in a way that other things perhaps are not. those are some of the key criteria that I would consider. Now, the next question you might have is, where do we find some of these things? And I was looking at it and trying to figure out where to find some resources that would give us an answer to this question. Anonymous asks, is there a list of DEXs and the level of decentralization each has achieved? How does one go about finding them? Now, on today's show, we're going to do something a bit different on this live stream. I'm going to show you a website, and before I show you the website, I'm going to warn you this is a test. It's a test of two things. One, it's a test of my ability to convey to you and your ability to grasp the importance of the following statement. This isn't an endorsement. I don't know if this website's going to be crap tomorrow. I don't know if it's complete. I don't know if it's compromised. I don't know if it's taking money in order to promote or endorse specific decentralized exchanges. What I do know is that right now, it seems to have a fairly good, complete list with some decent analysis of their characteristics and an easy-to-use interface. It's okay. It works for me. Will it still be like that tomorrow? I don't know. Should you trust this to make your decisions? Absolutely not. So that's the first test. I hope you understood that I'm being very careful about not making an endorsement here, but simply giving you a resource that you can look at. The second test is that I'm going to try and put my head in a tiny, tiny little circle, like this. Oh, there I am. Oh, the mask isn't quite centered. 1 second. Let me sit very low in my chair. There. Now I'm centered. It looks ridiculous if you could see it in full screen. I'm going to have to adjust how we circle this particular thing. You can see that my shoulders are way up here. We're going to make some adjustments. Anyway, regardless, this is a site which I think is kind of useful. It's called DeFi Prime. DeFi Prime. And DeFi Prime has a list of decentralized exchanges. You'll have to click on a link from the home page. And in that list, it categorizes them as Ethereum decentralized exchanges, Bitcoin, EOS, Tron, or aggregators, no KYC, and non-custodial. So that actually gives you a bunch of the criteria that we have defined before. And it allows you to see that there are quite a lot of exchanges. And one of the interesting categories that I didn't even know about until I came across this site and actually started finding them, which I hadn't thought of, is aggregator decentralized exchanges. So, 1 second. Okay, you see how ridiculous it looks in full screen? Let me sit up again. So aggregator decentralized exchanges. So back to the question by Anonymous. Yes, there are some lists. And one of the interesting things about this is that it can expose you to a variety of different categories, and you can learn about all of the different permutations, the different species of decentralized exchanges that exist. And of course, you know, we've been talking about decentralized exchanges a lot in relation to Ethereum. And most of the searches you'll do are crypto-to-crypto decentralized exchanges, but those are not the only ones. In fact, one of the oldest and most prominent decentralized exchanges, Bisq, and one of the, until last year, or perhaps a bit sooner than that, no KYC options for local exchange, local Bitcoins, are both very well-known decentralized exchanges that specialize in fiat to Bitcoin exchange, although Bisq can also do Bitcoin to other cryptocurrency and ERC token exchange. So it's interesting to see how all of these work, and I was fascinated to learn about this particular subcategory of decentralized exchanges that I hadn't even known about, called aggregators. And what aggregators are is, think of this as a single interface that brings together the liquidity, order book, and access, transactional access, to a number of different decentralized exchanges. This is mostly, or perhaps almost entirely, for decentralized exchanges that operate on Ethereum. which allows you to exchange a whole bunch of ERC tokens. But interestingly enough, there are multiple ones of these. So you have 0x, DYDX, there's Binance has one now, there's Bancor, and I'm probably forgetting a whole bunch of others that are very well known. But in any case, there are a number of decentralized exchanges on Ethereum, but they all have separate little liquidity pools. So one of the advantages of using an aggregator is that you can bring all of those together and have them on the single interface, see where the best deals are, etc., etc. All right. I'm going to take a quick break, drink some coffee, and get back to your questions in just a second. Have a look at the moderation rules in the meantime. All right, and we're back. This is an interesting one. Anonymous asks, what do you think of decentralized exchanges built on layer 2 technology like Stakenet DEX using the Lightning Network and Raiden network to avoid on-chain congestion and fees? This is really, really interesting, and I think we're going to see a lot of decentralized exchanges move to layer 2. It makes a lot of sense because one of the big disadvantages of decentralized exchanges in comparison to centralized exchanges is that the transactions are slow. So getting to finality on your transactions is going to be much slower than trading in a centralized order book on a centralized exchange. A layer 2, of course, fixes this. And in fact, when I first started talking about the Lightning Network, one of the things that really attracted me to this technology and made it very interesting for me was the fact that the Lightning Network is, by definition, a multi-currency network, multi-currency capable network. Today it operates on Bitcoin and Litecoin only because of the architectural similarities between the two. And the atomic swap type capability or currency exchange capability that is possible, whereby you start a payment on Bitcoin and the recipient receives Litecoin or vice versa, that really hasn't been developed yet. There are a couple of interesting wrinkles involving the ability to have zero cost futures, essentially, by using this technology, which need to be solved. But nevertheless, it's something that always interested me. And even if you don't have that built into one network like Lightning Network, you can easily build a bridge that takes a commitment for a Lightning payment and converts it into a Raiden payment on Ethereum and vice versa. And what this allows you to do is essentially atomically swap between payment channels on layer 2 networks, which then gives you the finality, speed, security, and privacy of a layer 2 network, plus the ability to do a decentralized exchange. So what do I think of DEXs built on layer 2? Once we have efficient, well-designed DEXs on layer 2, there won't be any DEXs on layer 1. It doesn't even make sense to have them operate on layer 1 if you can have them operate on layer 2. And so, like many other functions, I think we are going to see that and the whole ecosystem of innovation around decentralized exchanges will move to layer 2, like many other aspects of innovation have moved to layer 2 already. Let's see what else we have here. CryptoCurious asks, can colored or flagged Bitcoin be sent to a DEX? As far as I know, no. not because of any inherent technical impossibility. I think it's quite possible to make a transaction into a DEX that preserves the color of a colored coin. But I don't think I've seen any DEX implement that. And part of the reason I don't think they've implemented it is because the industry as a whole has really moved from colored coins on Bitcoin to ERC tokens on Ethereum, ERC20 tokens, to smart contract-based tokens. Now, you don't have to agree that that's a good idea or not. You may think colored coins are a much superior implementation of this concept, and of course they are on the robust blockchain of Bitcoin, which makes them inherently better. Unfortunately, in technology, inherently better doesn't always win. And in the case of tokenization, what we're seeing is a clear trend. And the clear trend is the market is preferring to implement these things on Ethereum because they can get faster implementation. Of course, a lot of that is because scammers are really in a hurry to deploy their faster implementation of their crap. But some of it is not crap. So I don't think we're going to see colored coins or flagged coins really developed much in decentralized exchanges unless we see a lot more development of that on top of the Lightning Network, maybe. But even then, I think the market has spoken clearly. Tokens live on Ethereum. It's really as simple as that. And most of the world has moved in that direction, so there's not much incentive to develop this in a decentralized exchange. I know you're not going to like that answer. I'm not endorsing it. I'm simply observing what's actually happening in the market. Shoot the messenger. All right. Anonymous asks, can you please list the issues you think are the biggest challenges to make a true decentralized exchange using atomic swaps? What do you think of TierNolan's atomic swaps protocol? Honestly, I'm not familiar with TierNolan's atomic swaps protocol. I can tell you from my perspective what I think are some of the biggest challenges. Atomic swaps require custom scripts in Bitcoin. They require custom smart contracts in Ethereum. And they require either a user interface that allows you to make those transactions or some kind of website aggregator or application where you have to import keys or have another wallet where you make those transactions. So because you need special scripts which require special transactions, at least on Bitcoin, it's actually difficult. You would have to have a specialized wallet that can do atomic swaps. And that means having another wallet, custodial or non-custodial. Obviously, you would choose to have a non-custodial wallet, but you would still need to move money into it and use it to do these atomic swaps. So actually designing a user interface that takes the capabilities of the scripting language to do this, quite complicated, and we haven't seen much development in that area. When it comes to Ethereum, these are smart contracts. It's a lot easier to build kind of generic user interfaces that access smart contracts and expose that functionality either in a Web3 style website without taking custody of the funds or something equivalent, which is why we've seen these technologies flourish in Ethereum. But the biggest challenges are in the user interface. Interestingly enough, one of the areas that might make a significant difference in the ability to do this, especially for chains like Bitcoin, is the invention of miniscript, which is a topic we haven't really covered before. I'm just going to drop a very quick line about this. Miniscript is a higher level language for describing Bitcoin scripts that can be compiled effectively down to Bitcoin script in a very efficient manner. But most importantly, it allows developers to do various things like formal reasoning, optimization, refactoring, and semantic and syntactic description of custom scripts. Now, if you imagine a wallet today which has to make a transaction, it has to know how to construct a script for multisig, a script for SegWit, a script for wrapped SegWit. Each of these things are done with custom code. Miniscript would allow a wallet to have a description of how to construct a script and be able to construct any script with any description just by knowing its miniscript code. And what this would do is it would allow wallets to do very interesting custom scripts, including custom scripts for things like lightning payment channels and splice in, splice out, and atomic swaps. And this is where it gets interesting. This is technology that is moving very fast in the Bitcoin space. And I'm very excited to start seeing it in wallets because I think this will revolutionize the ability to connect innovations on the script side with user interfaces that allow users to use these new innovations without having to go deep into the code. All right, we have 590 people watching, and you know what that means? That means it's time for an emoji storm in the chat. No, it doesn't really mean that. It's just a silly excuse for me to say the words emoji storm and to invite you to make an emoji storm. And this is the moment for those who have signed up for a YouTube membership and get access to our 10 or 15 custom emojis to showcase them to everybody else on the chat who will turn green with envy when they see the amazing custom emojis that you have due to your YouTube membership. So let's go with the emoji storm while I queue up another question. All right, we've got 10 minutes left, and I've only got a couple of questions that I'm really liking right now. So let's see if we can find some more questions to answer, but let me go with this one for now. Mr. Dents is asking, how do you think authorities will react or have already reacted to the unregulatable and unstoppable nature of decentralized exchanges? Well, not well, really. They're not reacting well at all. This is a fundamental change in worldview that has a ripple effect across all forms of regulation. Turns out it wasn't regulators who regulated cryptocurrency, but it was cryptocurrencies that disrupted regulators in a very, very meaningful way. And the fact that decentralized exchanges will worry regulators is only in addition to everything else that has the word decentralized in front of it. Decentralized currency, decentralized web, decentralized exchange, decentralized voting, decentralized governance, decentralized identity, decentralized everything. Why? Because regulators are centralized and they can't regulate decentralized things. So how do they react? Well, I have a model, a framework that I didn't invent, but I gleefully repeat every time someone asks me about the reactions of regulators, bankers, and other antiquated mechanisms of governance and institutions to this new brave world of cryptocurrency and decentralized technology. And that framework is the 5 stages of grief. They're losing the world that they thought they knew. And so they go through these 5 stages in cycles. Denial. This isn't happening. This shouldn't happen. This won't happen. It's going to die any second now. It's already dead. And if it isn't, we'll regulate it. Anger. Terrorists, criminals, pedophiles, our opposition political party, the people we don't like, and everybody under 30 are using this stuff, and they shouldn't. So stop doing it, and I will scream until you do. Bargaining. You have blockchains, we have blockchains. Please welcome our new very centralized, not at all decentralized exchange. Please welcome the Chinese Communist Party centralized digital currency. It's just like cryptocurrencies, except in every way possible. Blockchains can now be used for all of the things you wanted, as long as they include government surveillance TM. And this bargaining of trying to give us the same thing as long as it's completely centralized, under their control, and under surveillance. We're going to see this game happen again and again and again. As part of that, they're going to try to draw a false line and ban all of the things that are really decentralized by giving us fake alternatives that are not really decentralized. After bargaining comes depression. This is the realization that they no longer control the development of these technologies, and the only way to really stop them is to turn off the internet entirely. And then if they do that, they lose all of the other benefits of the internet, and so that becomes highly problematic. We go back to bargaining, where they say, can we turn off some parts of the internet? Can we make a great big firewall? Can we write an executive order that bans TikTok or something else that we don't like next? Can we sabotage democracy itself in order to achieve safety, security, and permanent governance? And then we go back to depression. Finally, perhaps decades from now, we will reach acceptance. And the only reason we will reach acceptance is because these people will get replaced by people who are currently under 30 years old and who have always lived in a world as adults where Bitcoin existed, and who will grow up and continue to operate in a world where decentralized technologies have changed the nature of society. And when they arrive in power, they will be able to accept the things that they've already accepted. That's your 5 stages of grief. All right, thank you, Victor, for pulling over and participating in the emoji storm. Don't forget, it's very important to not emoji and drive. So if you have to, pull over. If you're watching this live stream from your car, it is unsafe. All right, this is an interesting one from CryptoAndrew. What are relay tokens and how do they work? I have some on my Bancor account and I can't seem to figure out how to change them into the main tokens. What I understand is that in many of these decentralized exchanges, there are a couple of different specialized tokens that are used for different functions. Generally, the 2 functions that I know of the most are tokens for intermediate exchange. So instead of going from Bitcoin to Ethereum, you go from Bitcoin to some kind of intermediary token, which can then be exchanged for any of the other tokens on the platform. Meaning that instead of having to have a trading pair for every token, cryptocurrency, and blockchain currency with every other token, cryptocurrency, and blockchain currency, these decentralized exchanges often simplify things by having some kind of synthetic token which cannot be traded outside of the platform, or is a stable coin, or uses some other characteristic, and they have a trading pair between every token and this. Let's call it the X token. So you have Bitcoin to X token, Ethereum to X token, DAI to X token, USDT to X token, YAMS to X token. And then in order to do an exchange between, say, Bitcoin and Ethereum, you go from Bitcoin to X token, from X token to Ethereum, and that way you don't have to have markets for all of the pairs. That's a common thing. Another thing you see is tokens being used for fees. So in such systems, you pay fees such as exchange fees, escrow fees, reputation fees, various things like that with a custom token. And again, that would be created within the system in order to facilitate a secondary market of these custom tokens. And that's often how these exchanges make their money. By introducing this new token that you have to use for transaction fees that earns them value. Now, I don't know what relay tokens are. I don't know if relay tokens are some kind of fee token or if they're an intermediary exchange token. I wasn't really prepared for this question because it was literally just asked, and I can't always answer things just like that. But so maybe I made a good guess. Maybe it's something to do with fees. Maybe it's an intermediate exchange. If it isn't, I would like to learn. Talk about it in the chat if you happen to know the answer to this, or drop a comment in the YouTube video so that I can learn. All right. I think there's 2 minutes to go. Let's see. Craig Bursky asks, if I'm using a DEX while sailing in international waters, which country should I pay taxes to? Craig, well, that depends on a number of very important factors. Factor 1, how stealthy is your sailboat? Factor 2, how well armored is it against 155mm shells from the Coast Guard? Factor number 3, why would you pay taxes since you lost all of your crypto in an unfortunate and tragic boating accident? Factor number 4, are you a US citizen? In which case the answer is always you pay taxes to the US no matter where you are. Factor number 5, how much food do you have on the boat so you can avoid ever entering national waters? Or do you have a helicopter that can resupply you? And if you have great answers to all of those questions, please share them in the chat. The bottom line is, I think it's probably best to just pay taxes somewhere and use some of your newfound crypto wealth to hire a good accountant and a good lawyer and a good captain so that you can survive this international crypto exchange in international waters. But that was a great, great question. And that brings us to the end of this particular live stream. I had some really fantastic questions today. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you for asking great questions. Today we broadcast simultaneously on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. I don't know how it worked. Why don't you tell me? I'm only watching the YouTube chat, but I'm going to go afterwards and look at comments on Facebook and Twitch and see if other people participated, if anybody found it or was interested in watching it on a different platform, and we'll see if we repeat this experiment next time. Thank you so much for helping me do that. Thank you to all the patrons who are supporting this mission of global education on Bitcoin and open blockchains with a neutral and unbiased perspective. I couldn't do it without you. My team couldn't do it without you. And trust me, it takes a lot of people to produce this incredibly high quality live stream that has rabbits and holes and weird effects and little circles where I have to hunch my shoulders, and simultaneous live stream and a producer who laughs at my jokes while I'm doing them live. Next week, behind the scenes, how I set up this studio. If you're ever curious about how this studio works, many of you know I'm a nomad, so a lot of my gear has to fit in a couple of hardened cases. And so setting up a studio every time I arrive in a new undisclosed location takes quite a bit of work. And next week you can watch a live stream that tells you exactly how I set up this studio. Behind the scenes that shows you me frantically moving around the room and setting everything up, as well as all of the different pieces of equipment I use to produce this world-class, high-quality live stream. I'm just kidding. But, you know, this is what we have, this is what we do, and you get a sneak peek with a live premiere next week. I'll be in the chat answering your questions during that live stream. And we have a whole bunch of new live stream topics. Towards the end of this month and in September, we're going to be doing a bunch of bonus live stream Q&As. If you're interested in a specific topic, please tell us in the chat or by YouTube comment. And of course, if you're a Patreon subscriber, you've probably been participating in the poll and the comments we have where we're asking you what other topics we should cover. I'm Andreas Antonopoulos. It's been an absolute pleasure doing this live stream with you. Thank you for the great questions. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone.